recall you some notation. Sigma will be the variance of y. Okay, and so we had the decomposition of the variance that tells us that something that I call the variance of the fourth term. Okay, and we define some indices that were okay, and we saw how to estimate them, and we have a central limit theorem for them. Okay, and we saw so we have nice property here. Because this index is invariant with respect to translations, scalings, and isometry of the output. Okay, so the question is, do we have a unicity of such indices? So what about unicity? Okay, so the answer of this question will be no. So I will give you another example, another construction of another index that has exactly the same property, that it will be invariant by translation, scaling, and isometry. Okay, so consider a matrix P so we take a matrix P that diagonalizes P, sigma, okay. So we have that P transpose sigma P is diagonal, okay. And now, so now I take if I take consider the matrix I equals sigma E minus 1 P and B equals P transpose, of course we have that A times B is equals to sigma minus 1, okay? And now if I multiply equation 1 by B on the left side and A on the right side. So we obtain that the identity matrix would be B on the left side. So I have Okay, so but what we can also do, we can do also the contrary. They say I take A equals to P and B equals to P transpose sigma minus 1. In that case, you do exactly the same thing. So if you do that, okay. So if you think a little bit, when you want to have an index, you want that so that will be so those two things. They are some kind of a okay. If you do the computation, it's easy to see that they are invariant with respect to translation, scaling, and isometry. Okay, just some easy algebra computation. But what you want that your index that means that for example, I say that the influence of the first variable on the output KL, so on your output KL here should be the same of the influence on the output LK. Okay. So to do that, you can just define. You just can do the sum of these two equations and divide by 2, and then you have a symmetric matrix as an index. Okay, but what I did here is that here I made a choice of some matrix that diagonalizes sigma. Okay, you have several matrices P that can be diagonalized. Okay, so what we can do do it for all the matrices P, and integrated all the index with respect to some law over the P. Okay, so that's exactly what I will do now. So, yeah.
First equation is not clear.
Sorry.
First equation, expression of the last one. It is variance of y.
This one. When I write the Hoeffding decomposition, there was 4 terms. Yeah. So this one is just, I can write it if you want. Let me write it here. Okay, well, if you do the Hoeffding decomposition, you will just have y is equal to E of y plus y minus all those guys. Okay, so 4 is just okay. Is it okay or no? Okay, so I will assume for this lecture that I will assume that the eigenvalues of sigma are simple. If they are not simple, we can do the same thing, just a little bit complicated, but it can be done, okay? So, okay, since I have a symmetric matrix, the eigenvalues are positive, and they are simple, so I can order them from the smallest one to the biggest one, okay? And so I say that OE will be so I take the OE be the unique eigenvector associated to lambda E, such that whose first non-zero component is positive. Okay, so there's a unique eigenvector with norm 1. Which first non-zero component is positive, okay? So this, okay? And I take O, the orthogonal matrix whose columns are those eigenvectors. Okay? So this is one way of choosing this matrix. Okay. So now I will. So now we will consider HD will be the group of a sign permutation of matrix of size D. So what does this mean? It means that so this is a group of matrix. It means that P belongs to HD. This is equivalent that so okay. In each row and each columns of P, you have we'll have one and only one non-zero element. And this element will be plus or minus 1. Okay? Maybe I can give you all those matrices in dimension 3. So for example, what is a what do you have in H3? You have the identity matrix. Okay, and then you can put plus or minus 1, and plus or minus 1 here. Then you will have this matrix. Let's say And then you can plus or minus 1 here, plus or minus 1 here, plus or minus 1 here, then you will have and again with plus or minus 1, plus or minus 1, plus or minus 1. Okay, and so on. And the last one. Okay. In some sense, this will just what we'll do the operation with a matrix in HD. Will just change the order of your eigenvector. You can just change the order of the eigenvectors, or change the sign of the eigenvector. Okay. And if you do that, you will have all the possible matrix and the diagonalized sigma. Okay. Okay, so it's easy to see that any matrix okay, so any matrix that diagonalizes sigma, I can write it in the form O times P with P in HT. Okay. So now what I do, I take mu you take a mu, a probability measure on HD. Okay, so this is a finite set HD, so you have it's really easy to define probability measure on HD. Okay, and I will define an index. Okay, so it will depend on the set of variables you are considering and the probability measure I'm considering here. Okay. So Tu of mu would be what? 1/2 because I want something that is symmetric, so that's because I'm symmetrizing, so I do the integral over all the matrices, okay, in HD of then I integrate with respect to mu over all the matrix P that are in HT, okay? So this is a sensitivity index that is a matrix that has the same size. Yeah, so it's a D times D if the output is in RD, okay? So it is easy to check. Okay, and if D equals to 1, you just recover the classical Sobol index. You can, in that case, just have one matrix in the group. Okay. Okay, so So now, so there's maybe an arterial choice of mu. It would be to take the uniform distribution of on HD. So what happens? So now consider so now if you take the uniform distribution on the group HD, there's some kind of miracle. Okay, that is, we have this very surprising property. Okay, that is if you take any matrix of size D, okay, and you do the integration on you integrate this matrix multiplied by P transpose NP with respect to the uniform distribution at HD. So here you have a very surprising result. You just find we just find the trace of the matrix A divided by D times the identity matrix of size D. Okay. So maybe I can try to do the proof. The surprising result. Okay, so element in HD you can always write them as a product of two matrices, D epsilon and P sigma, where so epsilon will be in the set -1 plus 1 to the power D, and sigma will be one permutation of SD. Okay. So D epsilon, what is it? What is it? D epsilon so D epsilon would just be the matrix, the diagonal matrix with epsilon 1, epsilon D on the diagonal, and P sigma will just be the permutation matrix associated to sigma. That means that at the line I and column G, you will have 1 will have 1 if the image of I with the permutation is J, and 0 if not. Okay. Okay, and I will denote by P epsilon sigma this matrix. Okay, so okay, so when we integrate with respect to the uniform distribution that we will have, so I take the uniform. How many matrices do I have in this set? How many matrices of this kind do I have? I have 2 to the power k matrix, okay? Because I have 2 choices for each of the epsilon I, okay? And how many matrices do I have here? That will be a factorial k, okay? So I have 1 over 2k divided by k factorial, okay? Because I have the uniform law, the sum over sigma, the sum over epsilon. Okay? So I can write this sum over sigma, P sigma transpose, sum over epsilon, okay. Now if I take just a look over this matrix here, I should have a transpose here, but since the matrix is diagonal, it's the same, okay? So I didn't put a transpose, okay? So what is the term, the generical term of this matrix? You can do so I let you do the computation, but it's easy to see that it would be epsilon I, A, I, G, epsilon J, okay? Okay, so now when you do the sum here, okay, over all of the epsilon, over this one, what you will find something like okay, and maybe I let you, so again, it's just some classical algebra manipulation, and at the end, you will find exactly what you want. You will find the trace of A divided by K. Okay, so if you put everything in your index, what you find is that the TU with the uniform distribution okay. So maybe we can now compare this index with the one I presented yesterday on some example. So let's, I think we had the example. So remember, we have this example yesterday. Okay. And I recall you that we found that, okay, and we found that this one was okay, that was what we found yesterday. Okay. So what is sigma here? So I think we did the computation yesterday. It was okay, so if you want to compute this index, you have to compute the inverse of the matrix. Okay, so this is easy because it's a 2 by 2 matrix. So I'm just giving you the result. So if I didn't made any mistakes, we should have something like that. Okay, you compute C1 and C2. So I think we did the computation yesterday. And we found that C1 was equal to okay, we did this computation yesterday. And then you can compute sigma minus 1 C1 and sigma minus 1 C2. Okay, so I think you should find something like one divided by okay, and I compute the trust directly. Okay, and so on, you can do the computation. Okay, so I'll let you finish these computations. And when you do that, if then you say that A equals to 1, I think that you find something that is independent of B, which is not the case here. Okay, so one of the drawbacks of this method is if you want to compute explicitly your index, what you have to do is to compute the inverse of this matrix that we don't know. We will just have an estimation and maybe have for computational, the computation could be difficult, okay? And when we define those index, we didn't have to inverse any matrix, okay? And also, the interpretation of this index is a diagonal matrix. It's not really clear how we can interpret that, okay? So just to say, when you want to define the index, the equivalent of Sobol index in dimension larger than 1, you have no unicity, okay? I present two ways of doing this, but here I choose the uniform distribution on the group HD, but I could have chosen any other distribution that will have give me another index, okay? So that's one thing to remind of. Okay. Other questions? So just one remark before the so another advantage of this index is that we can generalize it when your output is not a vector but lies in a Hilbert space. Okay, if you lie in the so if y is in H. So you can define your covariance operator and the conditional covariance operator, and you can define the trace, and you can have exactly the same definition of the index when your output is in a Hilbert space. And then to estimate the trace, you will just truncate the sum at some level. That will depend on the number of observations that you let go to infinity, and you will have some results, okay? So maybe that should have been the first question. So are Sobol indices good, okay? Who can tell me what measures the variance of a random variable? The variance of a random variable, it measures the way your random phenomenal go far from the mean value, okay? So since the Sobol indices they are built with the variance, it measures the importance of an input with respect to the mean value of your output, okay? So okay, so But in some application, for example, you are not interested in the mean value of the output. Maybe you are just interested in extreme value of your output. Okay. So in that case, it's more or less obvious that the Sobol indices are not well tailored. Okay. Let me just give you an example. Take, for example, take just two random variables, x1 and x2, that are exponential distributed with parameter 1, okay, and consider y to be x1 minus x2, okay. Here, if you compute your Sobol indices, you will find that S1 equal S2 equal 1/2, okay? So this is telling you that X1 and X2 has the same influence, but this is just true for the mean behavior of Y, okay? If you're interested in high values of Y, okay, for the values that are larger than 100, intuitively, what should be the most important variable? It's x1, okay? You need that x1 is large if you want to have a large value of y, because the x2 is not possible, okay? So intuitively, you want to have something that detects that if you're interested, for example, at the value, you don't want that y is over some thresholds, okay? What is the most important variable? Intuitively, we are sure that it's x1, but this is not shown by the Sobol indices. Okay? And another problem with Sobol indices is the following. Imagine, I take another example. For example, this one. Okay, and imagine, so again, x1 and x2 are independent. And I assume that they have imagine you take two random variables that have the same first moments, okay? But they are different in law, okay? But with so it's possible to have two different laws that have the same force moments, but they are different, okay? So what happened in that case? Compute the variance of the conditional means of y knowing x1, that will be just okay, and so we have that S1 is equal to S2, okay? But obviously, X1 cannot have the same influence of X2 on the output since they don't have the same distribution. And my function is completely symmetrical with X1 and X2, okay? So this is a symmetric function of X1 and X2. So if they don't have the same distribution, they cannot have the same influence on the input, okay? But this is not detected by the Sobol indices, okay? Just because the Sobol indices is just on the variance, and we lose a lot in information on the distribution if you only use the variance. Okay? So, so there is two ideas here. Is so. So the first problem is how can I construct some sensitivity indices that behave well with some quantity of interest you have. Okay, if you are interested in the fact that your output do not have to go upon some threshold, or if you are interested in a quantile or something, or in the mean value, it's clear that if you are interested in the mean value, the Sobol indices are very good. Okay, if you are not interested in the mean value, maybe they are not interesting. Okay, and the second problem. Is to how can I define some indices that depends not only on the variance but more or less on the whole distribution of the output. Okay. So for this lecture, I will only present the second point, and maybe if I have some time after, at the end, I will talk about the first point. Okay. Okay, so I will change a little bit the notation. You will understand why in a minute. Okay, so now I'm calling the output Z and not Y anymore. Okay. And I can consider the geometric distribution function of Z. Okay. So I recall that this means so this is a vector. This is a vector. So just this means that the first component is smaller than the first one, the second than the second one, and so on. Okay, and I can take a look at the conditional distribution function that will be the probability that Z is less than T, knowing Xi for I in U. Okay. Another way of writing this is just the expected value of the indicator function of Z less than T, and this would just be Okay? So now what I can do for any fixed t, in RD, okay, I consider a new code. So that is why I did change the notation. So yt is just my new code, is the indicator function that z is less or equal to t. Okay? And for this code, so for y, okay, we can write the Hövding decomposition of the variance. Okay, and so we'll obtain at the end that the variance of y of t. What is the variance of y of t? Someone? This is just a binomial random variable. It takes only two values, 0, 1. Okay? And you know that the variance of the binomial is p minus times 1 minus p, so that would just be f of t 1 minus f of t, okay? And so that will be the variance of f u of t plus the variance of f u tilde u of t plus the variance of the last term. Okay? But this one, the variance of f of ut, I can write it as it's easy to see that the expected value of f of ut is just f of t, okay? Because it's the expected value of the conditional expectation. Okay, so we have that so the variance of f of ut is just the expected value of f ut minus ft to the power 2. Okay, and we have exactly the same thing for the other one. Okay, so I have this equality for any t. So what I will do now, I will integrate over all t inequalities. So that will be equality 2. So, how should I? So I have to choose a measure for my integration here. Okay. So I could I could choose the Lebesgue measure on the output space, but that would not be a good idea. Okay. What you want to give some more importance on the points that are visited by Y. Okay. If okay, Y is in, Z is in RD. Okay, so this is RD, but maybe Z only take values in a small part of RD. This you don't know. Okay, so if you take the Lebesgue measure, you will give importance of some points that will never be seen by Z. Okay. So it's a better idea to take integration with respect to the law of the output. Okay? So that means that if you have a high probability here that Z goes in a small part, you will give a huge mass of this set in your integration, and you will take into account that fact. Okay? So I integrate this inequality over T with respect to the law of the output of Z. Okay? Okay, so what do we have? We have we have the integral in RD of ft1 minus ft dft. Okay, so. Okay, so that would be equals to an integral on RD of fu of t minus ft square dft plus the integral over RD of f till ut minus ft square dft plus the integration of the last term over RD with respect to dft. Okay? And now I can divide both sides by this number, and I have divided by, so we divide okay, and so we have one, and so thanks to that we can define yes.
Shouldn't there be an expectation in front of?
Yes. You are right. There's an expectation missing. You're not. Yes, thank you. Okay. So why did I put CVM here? CVM stands for so if you are it's something the Kramer von Mises distance is a classical distance when you compare the empirical distribution function with the true distribution function. It's really look like this. But when they do the Kramer von Mises distance, and what is the Kramer von Mises distance? So if you take so if you have some law with distribution function f, and you take an ID sample of this law, and you build the empirical distribution function, the Kramer von Mises distance so it's exactly what I'm writing. So the Kramer von Mises distance is more or less the same thing I'm writing here, but the difference, they integrate the classical Kramer von Mises distance. They are integrating with respect to the Lebesgue measure on your space. Okay? Yes?
The third term similarly will be variance of 4.
Sorry?
The third term will be variance of 4.
This one là?
No, next.
Is is the variance of 4. Okay? The last term in my decomposition, but is the y minus, is this one, okay? I don't want to write it. Okay? So this is why we call this index Kramer von Mises index, because the distance here is really like the classical Kramer von Mises distance. Okay? So this is an index that depends more on the whole distribution than the Sobol index, because I integrate over all the t. Okay, so in some sense I'm taking into account all the variability of my phenomenon. Okay, it has the same kind of properties. It means that it's invariant with respect to scaling, rotation, isometry. Okay, so it's defined in dimension 1, but in dimension d also. Okay, so I don't have this problem of unicity when my output is not real anymore. Okay, so now the question is, okay, this is a very nice index, but is it possible to estimate this index? Because if I'm not able to estimate it, it's not useful. Okay, practice. So first, maybe I can do some remark about the denominator here. Okay, so for a moment, So, for example, if you are in dimension 1 and the distribution of your output is absolutely continuous with respect to the Lebesgue measure, okay, what happens? It's easy to compute. You can compute exactly the denominator so dft in this case would just be the derivative of f dt, okay? And so now it's easy to, d equals 1, sorry. Up. So I have the integral over r of f of t, f prime of t dt, minus the integral over r of f square of t, f prime of t dt. So this is just so it's a really, you have an easy integration to do. So this is just f squared divided by 2, the primitive, and this is just f to the power 3 divided by 3. So since this is, so we know that the limit on plus infinity of this guy is 1 and the limit in minus infinity is 0. Okay, so you just have 1/2 minus 1/3, okay? So this is 1/6. Okay? So we see in that case that the denominator does not depend on, the value of the denominator does not depend on the distribution. Okay? It's not the case. This number can change if you have if you don't have a continuous distribution. Okay? If you have a Poisson distribution, you will not find 1 divided by 6, okay? You can do the computation for the binomial distribution, and you will see that you will not find 1, 6, okay? I want to keep that. And there's another case for if d is larger than 1. Okay. So if you are in dimension greater than 1, if, for example, you know that the component of your output vector are independent and are absolutely continuous, okay, then we have, so you can do the exact same computation here. You just have a product of integral because you have independence, and at the end you will find that we find 1 to the 2 power d minus 1 to 3 to the 3 power d. Okay. So just to say that in some case you don't need to estimate the denominator, because if you have some information, if you're in dimension 1 and you know that your output is continuous, then you know that it's just 1 divided by 6. Okay. So let's take a look at the estimator of the numerator. Okay. So I can rewrite that as this integral. Okay. I'm integrating with the respect of z. Okay. So if I take so if I take a copy of z, this one is just the I just take the expected value with respect to z bar of the this expectation here, this is a random variable inside that only depends on the variable xi for I in u, okay? With the definition of the conditional expectation, okay? So this is the expectation, in fact, with respect to the xi for I in u, okay? And this integral here, I can see that as the expected value with respect to the variable, a copy of z, okay? So I can write it as the expected value with respect to z bar of this guy, okay? So now to estimate, so we have two expected values. So we use a double Monte Carlo CHIM to build an estimator, okay? So we will use Monte Carlo estimators. Okay, so what will happen here? For this part, we will use, since they are exactly the numerator of sample index when I fix a 1t, okay, or the value of z bar, I will just use for this part the pick and freeze method. Okay. So for that we will need we will our first sample and then the pick freeze sample of Stasian our output, and then for this part I will use another n sample of the output that is independent of. So I will have independent from this sample, and this sample will be independent. Okay? So just let me write the design of experiments. Okay, so you have your ZG and the ZGU. Okay. So those two are not independent because here you took the same xi for I in U to simulate this one than in ZG. Okay. You remember that, or the big freeze method is okay? So that would say that you are so that means that here I compute 2n times my model. Okay, and then I simulate another sample of size n of my output that is independent of the previous one. Okay? And independent of okay, so in terms of simulation cost, that means that I have a cost of 3 times n. Okay, if we compare with the Sobol indices, to estimate the Sobol indices, the cost was 2 times n. Okay, so I'm losing n. Okay, but I have something that depends on the whole distribution. Okay, and we'll see that we'll have the same rate of convergence. Okay, so. Okay, so now imagine that I didn't do the integration with respect to t. Okay, so if I didn't do the estimation with respect to t, my peak and freeze estimator would be some more room here. Okay, so that will be the estimator of my numerator if I don't do the integration with t. Now, if I do the integration with t, so I will use the second Monte Carlo procedure. I will replace the t by the w here. So here I will have 1 over n. Let's say the sum for L equal 1 to L, and I replace the t by wl. Okay. You can do the exact same thing. So if you want to estimate the denominator, you have the same. So the denominator will be the same estimator, but here you will have this one, the same one, so you will have the square of the indicator. Okay. And so, and we can prove so that is S2 hat So again, we can prove that we have that the rate of conversion is square root of n. So I certainly will not prove this theorem here. So the proof relies on two things. It's you know the Donsker theorem? Yes, no? No, they don't. Okay, so it relies on the Donsker theorem and the functional delta method. Okay, that is the generalization of the delta method in functional spaces. Okay, so if you are interested, so those kind of things you can find it in I think it's chapter 19 and 20, I think. So I think it's chapter 19 and 20 of the book of the Van der Waart, where he explains the functional delta method. Okay, so it's not it's a little bit complicated, but the fact is that we will have the convergence in distribution. Okay, so maybe I will stop now for this first lecture. Okay, and in the last lecture we will do an example of computation of exact computation of this index. Okay. So do you have any questions? So maybe one thing you can find on my web page. Okay, everything that I presented is are coming from some of my articles. So in my web page you can find the articles, and there are also some lecture notes I did in Vietnam a few years ago that covers more or less what I told you. Okay. And if you are more detailed on some part, you can come and see me, and I can send you the articles if you can find them. Okay? Any questions?